Hey everyone, welcome back to Moving the Needle. I'm Chris Fink, founder of the MedSpot Agency, author of The Patient Magnet, and this is episode 1 of a 4-part series that I put together, and today we're going to talk about one of the most misunderstood decisions in med spa marketing, and that is when to scale your ad spend. Most owners think this comes down to one question, which is, can I afford to spend more on ads? But that's not the real question, is it? The real question is, are you ready? Is the practice ready for scaling? And will that increase in spend actually produce profitable, predictable growth? Today, we're going to go deep into when scaling ads makes sense, when it becomes harmful, how CAC and LTV, or customer acquisition costs and lifetime value, actually work, how to know if your practice is ready for scaling, and how scaling fits inside the Patient Magnet program. So not going to give you a whole bunch of gobbledygook and crazy stuff. I'm just going to try to provide some high value, some clarity, numbers, and systems that can help and protect your practice and help you grow responsibly. So let's get into it. In the med spa world, there is some common advice out there, such as you just spend more on ads and you'll get more patients. Sometimes that's true. Many times it is not true. The truth is that ad spend is not a growth strategy, it is a force multiplier. What that means is if your system is healthy, then ads can amplify that success. But if your system is weak, well, then ads can amplify the problems. And this is why so many practices feel stuck. They increase their budget, they get more leads, but their business does not grow the way they expect. And you don't fix a weak patient journey by spending more money. You fix the patient journey first, and then you decide if and when spending more money is the right lever. Now, there's basically 5 conditions for scaling ad spend responsibly. And inside the Patient Magnet system, attract is only one step. It's the first step, right? So in the Patient Magnet is attract, convert, retain, and amplify. And so thinking about all of this, this is part of the attract stage. And it's one lever. It does not exist in isolation. Scaling and attract only work when the other levers, such as convert, retain, and amplify, are already functioning. If you scale spend, then before you do that, you need to make sure that these 5 conditions are true. First off, do you have a clear offer? If the offer is unclear, inconsistent, or not compelling to the right people, ads will magnify confusion. Many campaigns will fail because the offer is not aligned with what the patient actually wants. It's what we think they want. So doing that research and making sure that you have really good offer clarity, and then conversion performance, conversion strength. And if your front desk is overwhelmed, if response times are slow, if consults lack structure, scaling your ad spend will burn budget, right? You don't need more leads at that point in time. You need better systems, better processes, better conversion elements. And then third is the retention patterns or retention capability. If your patients don't rebook, if care plans are unclear or you're not creating long-term relationships, then scaling spend is expensive and a fragile tactic. And low retention makes CAC unstable, right? And you have to get your CAC, or customer acquisition costs, stabilized. And capacity alignment is also the 4th one here. So what that means basically is there a revenue ceiling based on providers? If your providers are booked out and your team is stretched too thin, then scaling adds pressure. It doesn't add growth. You're just going to have more stuff out there that's going to wind up canceling, having issues, client dissatisfaction, poor reviews because they can't get in. So scaling at the right time and knowing that your treatment ceiling is reached, that is the time to pause and take analysis if you're ready to scale again. And lastly is just financial readiness. Scaling does require a margin buffer. And even the strongest campaigns, I don't care which agency it is out there, they all require a testing cycle. And if you're thinking about scaling your ad spend and just spending more money to try to get more leads or more patients, if you can't answer these 5 things clearly and in a positive way, then it's probably not the right time to consider scaling. So let's talk about customer acquisition costs, or CAC, and why many practices will misjudge it. Your customer acquisition cost is the number that tells you exactly what it costs you to acquire a new patient. Sounds fairly simple there. And the issue is that a lot of practices, a lot of businesses can calculate this incorrectly. They look at their ad spend, they look at their lead quality, divide that and call that CAC. But leads aren't patients. So a lead is simply someone who filled out a form or you somehow acquired their contact information. CAC is your total acquisition spend divided by the number of new patients actually seen. And that includes your ad spend, your management fees, landing page development, creative production tied to your campaign. And that's your real CAC. And why customer acquisition costs matter, it's probably self-evident, clear, but a high CAC is only a problem if lifetime value is very low. A low CAC is only meaningful if those patients stay and you have high retention. So when customer acquisition costs are viewed in isolation, emotional owners can make emotional decisions, right? Emotional based. And we need to look at facts over feelings, math over mystery. When CAC is viewed in context, then owners make strategic decisions. And that's what we're shooting for. Now, a moment ago, you heard me reference LTV, or lifetime value. And it's arguably one of the most important numbers in your practice. It tells you what a typical patient is worth over time. So this includes the initial visit, follow-ups, ascension into higher level services, memberships, maintenance treatments. And a patient who invests in long-term care is infinitely more valuable than a one-time injector patient who got a coupon off of Groupon and they never come back, right? So most practices discover that LTV patterns vary dramatically based on the service that brought the client in or the patient in, the clarity of the care plan, the strength of the rebooking habits, and the consistency of their communication. And this is why the patient magnet emphasizes retain so heavily. Retention is what makes acquisition profitable. I want to go back. Retention is what makes acquisition profitable. So retention is what stabilizes your customer acquisition costs, and it's what determines how aggressively you can scale ads and campaigns. And when you know your LTV, scaling becomes a financial decision rooted in reality, facts, and math instead of emotional decisions. So here's one of the simplest ways you can think about if scaling ads is a good thing. Lifetime value must exceed your customer acquisition costs by several multiples for it to make sense. So if your LTV is 3 or 4 times your customer acquisition costs, then you can scale safely. But if your lifetime value is only slightly higher than your CAC, then scaling becomes seriously risky because your margin for error is very small. And this ratio tells you everything. It reveals whether the practice can support increased ad spend without compromising profitability. And that's exactly why the patient magnet connects attract, convert, and retain. These levers are not independent. They function as a system. And when retention improves, lifetime value increases. When lifetime value increases, then you can tolerate a higher customer acquisition cost. And when you can tolerate a higher customer acquisition cost, then you can scale ads in competitive markets. And that's what creates predictable planning growth strategically. And really, it's as simple as this diagram. Is LTV at least 3 to 4 times customer acquisition cost? Yes? Sure, go ahead. Nope. You need to improve your convert and your retain elements of your practice and your patient journey. Now, there are some patterns that prove that you're ready to scale, and they consistently appear in practices that scale successfully. The first one is predictable conversion. Your show rates, your patient show up rates, and consult conversion rates they are stable month over month. So you know exactly what's going to happen. You can plan out because you have evidence that says if somebody comes in, this is the amount of times they're going to consult, and this is how many times they're going to treat. And then your lifetime value is healthy because you have a strong rebooking process and your team rebooks consistently. Pattern 3 is profitability on core treatments. The services that you scale are profitable and align with long-term value. And then lastly, operational capacity. You have the providers, the rooms, the front desk can support increased volume. And when these patterns exist, then scaling is strategic. When they don't, scaling adds pressure and inconsistency. So there's a couple proven ways to scale safely. The first is incremental. And this is one of the 3 responsible ways to approach scaling in the practice. And incremental scaling means that you're going to increase your spend by 10 to 20%, conceivably every 4 to 6 weeks. It depends on what level you're at and what your media buy is at that point, but it's controlled, it's predictable. Performance-based scaling is you make a change only when your conversion, your show rates, your lifetime value benchmarks remain stable. And then capacity-based scaling. Scale based on open provider availability. When rooms fill, schedules tighten, then that's when you pause or you back off a little bit and you optimize. But your method should match your goals, your team, and your comfort with financial pacing. And then the next thing to think about is what happens after you scale. And this is a part that a lot of owners miss. So scaling is not the finish line. Scaling is the starting line for the next phase of operational discipline. So once you scale, there's some things you have to do. You need to monitor your metrics weekly, not monthly, weekly. And in that, you should be tracking your cost per lead, your customer acquisition costs, your show rates, consult conversion rates, rebooking rates, and lifetime value trends. And you're going to need to communicate more frequently. The volume will increase, but as that happens, your team has to stay aligned. So you might need to adjust your operations. And scaling typically reveals some bottlenecks. You'll find that you're going to need to tune up or refine your scripts, your intake processes, follow-up workflows, provider scheduling. And then you're going to want to track your lifetime value by cohort. Some campaigns produce higher value patients, and so having those in alignment and segmented, that data informs future spend. And lastly, on this, I say this so many times, but you have to avoid emotional reactions. Short-term fluctuations are normal. What matters is trend stability. And this is the discipline behind predictable growth. So connecting this back to the patient magnet. Scaling is part of the attract lever, but attract cannot succeed properly without convert and retain in here. So customer acquisition costs are part of attract. Conversion elements, such as consult conversions and patient treatment rates, that's all convert. Lifetime value is part of the retain phase, and capacity reflects your amplify phase. So when the whole system is strong, then scaling's easy, right? But where parts of the system are weak, scaling exposes the cracks. So the med spas that grow the fastest, or the practices that I've seen grow the fastest and most profitably, they're the ones that understand that their numbers strengthen their systems, and they scale only when they're ready. Your ads should not carry the business. Your systems should. I think there was a quote that said, we rise to the level of our goals and aspirations, but we will always fall to the level of our systems. Is that Simon Sinek? I think it might have been. So this is part one. And if this helped you get clearer on how and when to scale your ad spend, make sure you stick with the full series. Next, in episode 2, we're going to break down the conversion bottleneck and why most med spas lose money after that first click. And if you want a custom blueprint for your magnet, including your customer acquisition cost, your lifetime value, readiness assessment for scaling, you can book a free strategy session with the MedSpa agency. And again, like, follow, and subscribe. Stick around for episode 2. If you found value, share this with another practice owner or manager who might get some value and they're trying to get their systems, processes, and their lead magnet functioning properly. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in episode 2.